Number 5 on this list is Hromovish Meadow. Considering how difficult that is to say, and it did take me a while, for the rest of this entry I'm going to refer to this place as the Lightning Meadow. The Lightning Meadow is located near the village of Kupiish in the northern areas of the country. It's pretty isolated and completely surrounded by thick forests. Even though it's relatively out in the middle of nowhere, it's still developed quite the legend for itself. This is largely due to the incredibly strange phenomena that occur at this place. As you probably guessed by the nickname that I gave to it, these strange occurrences involve lightning. Roughly a dozen people have been struck by lightning at this one location. That's a lot of people to get struck by lightning in one faraway Ukrainian meadow. Sometimes this place also emits a very strange glow. Locals will see it in the sky and know to stay away. It's this large cylinder of light that comes from the meadow and darts into the sky so all around the area can see it. This place also reportedly gives off the same feelings as our typical haunted spots, with many people who visit it feeling immense sensations of dread. Potentially they're just dreading getting hit by lightning though, because it seems that the odds are pretty good here. Locals avoid this meadow, and my recommendation to you, unless you want to get a very powerful shock, is to do the same. Number 4 on this list is Pidhirsti Castle. This castle is considered to be one of the most beautiful in the whole country. Its construction started out with a defensive fortification that was built in the 15th century and then blossomed from there to what it is today. The beauty of this castle is slightly overshadowed though by the creepy legends that currently surround it. A Ukrainian blog writes, "The history of the famous palace has many mysterious pages. There are many incredible rumors about one of the owners of the castle, a politician, Sirin Rizwuski, because of his rather peculiar hobby. They say that in his secret alchemical laboratory, Rizwuski was making a magical longevity potion and was searching for a philosopher's stone to create gold. He conducted these experiments and organized treasure hunting to attempt to improve the financial situation of the family. Today in the dungeon of the castle you can find an alchemical workshop. In the dusk, among the magical items, you can immerse yourself in the mysterious past of the castle." This isn't the only mystery that surrounds this place though. One of the most famous legends talks of a young girl who approaches visitors and asks to be given a proper Christian burial. It's believed that she's the ghost of a young woman who was banished from the castle by her husband and left for dead. There's also a white lady that floats throughout the castle walls. It's unclear whether the young girl and the white lady are one and the same, or if they're two separate ghosts sharing the same space. This castle's been featured on several television.
Coming in at number 3 we have House on the Embankment. The House on the Embankment is a block-wide apartment building that was built in 1931. With the relocation of the capital from St. Petersburg to Moscow, there was an increase in housing demand for civil servants. The apartments were luxury for their time, including telephones, central heating and high ceilings. When the Great Purge happened in the late 1930s, the residents were detained in their homes. During this time the building was referred to as the House of Preliminary Detention. As well as the residents, they would bring people they had detained elsewhere and force them into the apartments. Reports say that the apartments hold up to 5 sets of occupants at one time. During this time, over half of the original residents disappeared. It is believed they had been taken away, but no one ever knew they were simply never seen again. In present day, there are 505 apartments within the building, some used as offices, as well as theatres, restaurants and retail stores. The Great Purge left a mark on the building that it may never shake. Many executions were performed on the premises during this time. It is believed that the building is full of ghosts, victims of that time that cannot move on. Residents have seen paranormal things from within their home that they cannot explain. Some have seen things in the corner of their eyes. It appears like someone is walking around their home, but when they turn to see, they have gone. One terrified resident even reported seeing a man at the end of their bed, staring at them as they slept. When they jumped up from fear, the man disappeared. From all the stories we hear, it seems like the old residents are still attempting to live in their homes, lost and confused about what happened to them. Coming in at number 2 we have Griboyedov Canal. The Griboyedov Canal is located in St. Petersburg. It was constructed in 1739 alongside the existing river Krivusha. It is rare that a canal would be haunted, but the haunting is more of a yearly thing that you should avoid at all costs. The story goes back to 1881 with the Russian Empire revolutionary Sofia Perovskaya. She was arrested here and there for the revolutionary talk, but it was her final plan that would become the end of her, when her friend was arrested days before she took over the responsibility of the planned attack on Alexander II. The night before the attack, she helped to assemble the bombs that they were going to use. The attack went off as planned, Ferdinand Alexander II passed away due to her actions. She was quickly captured and was to be trialed for her crimes. Her friend, who was arrested the day prior, wanted to save his own life and turned in the rest of the participants. They were tried and sentenced to hanging. She was the first woman in Russia sentenced for acts of opposing her country. It was reported that her acts inspired other activists around the world in the years following. The day she died was March 22nd. It is now said that each year on the night of March 22nd, the air is misty. If you were to be walking down the canal, you would see the ghost of a young girl walking up and down the canal. She looks completely blue with a red mark on her neck. The worst part of the tale is that those who meet her become cursed. She is a bad omen. It is even rumored that she has caused pedestrians their lives. There have been a large number of mysterious disappearances or people falling into the river late at night when no one is around. Luckily, she can only appear once a year, so as long as you stay clear on that night, you should be safe. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Moscow Kremlin. The Kremlin is a world-famous fortified complex in the center of Moscow. It is the best known of the Kremlins. It includes 5 palaces, 4 cathedrals, along with the enclosing wall and towers. The complex is now the official residence of the President of the Russian Federation, as well as a museum for tourists. Before it was a museum for the public, it was used for the Soviet Union, and remnants of this still remain. The corridors are still lined with brown Soviet tiles, and the walls still have some of the secret communication wires. There have even been bones uncovered during archaeologists' dig in the underground storage rooms. They once buried their own on site. Some of the findings date back to medieval times. There are many mysteries hidden within the vast space of the Kremlin. There are still sections of the Kremlin today that go mostly unused, and many things may have not been uncovered to this date. There have been wars fought and secrets kept within the walls, and some of them have led to restless spirits trying to contact the living. There have been sightings of various ghosts, as well as other unexplained paranormal activity that takes place while guests visit. One of the most common sights is that of an old soldier. At first, he seems to blend in with the other security, but as you begin to notice his old uniform, he will often vanish. He has been seen by different guests on different occasions, but no one has been able to get closer to the spirit to see who they are or why they might be there. There have also been sightings of what is believed to be the royal children playing. They were all baptized on site during the 17th century. The monastery was unfortunately blown up in 1929 to make room for the new buildings. Around that site, you can sometimes hear children playing, and some have even claimed to see children dressed in older looking clothing. It is believed their spirits choose to rest here, as it was where they grew up and had a deep connection to the place. These are just a couple of instances of hauntings around the site. There is so much more to discover and see at the Kremlin.
Number 5 on this list is the Krakow Horror House. Located in the Włodzistowska district of Krakow, this house has been reportedly haunted since 1990. The good news is you won't be able to miss it, and therefore can avoid it pretty easily. It's said to have a tree growing straight out of the roof, weeds everywhere, has the windows and the doors all boarded up, has a lock on the gate, and has barbed wire on the fence. So even if you did want to go in, it would be pretty freaking hard. This house is said to have been haunted ever since the owner in 1990 hung himself inside. After this happened, weird things began occurring at this home. After the man died, a couple moved into this house, but moved out only a month after living there. One of the crazier things that happened to them was that their car turned on all by itself and drove straight into their garage. A jewelry company tried their luck at this home next and met a similar fate of weirdness. Their jewelry kept getting inexplicably broken inside the locked drawers. Nothing was stolen, just broken or crushed. Finally, an IT company came into the home, but they were met with an onslaught of fires that started from their own computers. Nowadays, this place is totally locked up and can't even be accessed. It's known by all the locals as being one of the most haunted homes in all of Poland. Clearly, the man who took his own life wasn't too fond of others inhabiting his space and did whatever he could to get them to leave. It could be a bunch of weird coincidences, but the things that happened are just simply too weird to be chalked up as that in my opinion. Like, how on earth does your car start by itself and drive straight into your home? It truly does sound like some ghostly intervention to me. If you don't want something weird and dangerous happening to you, then I would highly recommend avoiding this haunted home. Number 4 on this list is the Wieliczka salt mine. This salt mine is truly unbelievable and looks like something straight out of a fairy tale. Nearby the Polish city of Krakow, this salt mine is so beautiful it's considered to be a World Heritage Site. This mine was established in the 13th century. It was actually used for mining salt all the way until 2007. The mine descends to a depth of 327 meters and has horizontal passageways that extend a whopping 287 kilometers. This mine has some beautifully designed underground rooms and is a massive tourism spot for for people visiting Poland. Many of these tourists aren't aware that there's a legend surrounding these ancient walls though. It all started with a young boy many years ago. This young boy wanted to go and work in the salt mines because his family was very poor and he wanted to help support them. The foreman of the mine at the time would not accept his help because he thought that the boy was too young. After some pleading from the boy, the foreman finally told him that he could work for 1 week, and if he was impressed with his workload, then he could continue on in the mine. The boy happily accepted the challenge, but when he got down there, started struggling heavily. That was right up until another man approached this child and told him that he would help the boy in exchange for a portion of his wages. The boy accepted, and with this man's help was able to meet the foreman's expectations. The foreman paid the boy his week's wages, and as agreed, the boy then took his wages and offered a portion to the man who helped him. This man laughed him off though and revealed himself to be the treasurer of the mine, refused to accept the wages, and left the boy to his own devices. Ever since then, this treasurer of the mine has been spotted by workers or visitors throughout the years. He's said to reward good behavior but punish those who are bad. Stealing salt from the mine or anything else will be punished, but hard work and honesty, as exhibited by the boy, is rewarded. In my opinion, this spot is probably safe to visit as long as you behave appropriately when you're down there. Television show specifically about haunting, so if you desperately do feel the need to visit it, then I recommend at least giving one of those a watch first so you know what you're getting yourself into. Number 3 on this list is Vignina Lake. Vignina Lake is located in central Ukraine and is considered to be one of the most haunted lakes in the world. This lake is often not referred to as Vignina Lake though, it actually is the Ghost Lake. If you ever visit this lake, then you'll see a very interesting sight. Typically, there'll be a lot of people around. Some will be fishing, others may be picnicking, some may be hiking along the side. But no one, not a single person in all of this, will be swimming. The name Vignina is a derivative of the Ukrainian word for window. It's believed that this lake is actually a window into a whole other world. That this lake is a portal that can bring spirits from this other dimension, and if you aren't careful, send you down into it as well. Because of this lake's designation as a portal to another world, the water has some special qualities. For one, it never freezes. Ukraine can get pretty cold, but no matter how cold the area gets, this lake refuses to freeze over. This is probably due to the incredible amount of energy that's within it. This energy also makes the fish grow incredibly quickly. The rate of growth and the overwhelming size of some of the fish that are in this lake make it one of the best spots for fishermen in the whole country. It's unclear if anyone has actually been lost down into this portal, but it seems the locals believe in this lake legend enough that they don't want to see for themselves. Honestly, seeing a portal to another world would be pretty cool, but who knows what could come out of there. Highly recommend going if you want to fish or see some nice scenery. Highly don't recommend going if you're looking to take a dip though. Number 2 on this list is Bilhorod Dnistrovsky Fortress. Yeah, try saying that 5 times fast. This fortress is also referred to as the Ackerman Fortress and was first built over 1,000 years ago. It's one of the largest castles in all of Ukraine and also one of the biggest tourist attractions. The scenery is lovely, the architecture is beautiful, but the draw of these tourists is typically the hauntings. This castle is built over a collection of underground passageways. These passageways may look abandoned if you go down there, but locals believe them to be the home of some very strange creatures. Reports have come out over the years of people passing by the castle getting attacked by some dark-horned entities. These beasts have a very unique and pungent odor to them and are incredibly stealthy. The attacks have taken place at nighttime, and the victims of these have said that they were so fast that they couldn't defend themselves. The leading theory is that this is the home to some demonic kind of Australopithecus. If you're unfamiliar with what that is, then it's a type of ape that had both human and ape-like features. Very strong, very fast, and excellent climbers, these things used to live in Africa. How they managed to take up refuge at this castle in Ukraine and develop devil horns is anyone's guess. Ukraine has tons of castles to explore, so don't feel bad about leaving this one off your list and visiting some of the other ones instead. Number 1 on this list is Lisa Hora. Look up any list of haunted spots in Ukraine, and I guarantee that they will all have Lisa Hora close to the top. Nowadays, this place is a beautiful Ukrainian park, but it's had a deep and dark history attached to it. It's located in Kiev, and many of the local Kievians don't like to go near it. Over the years, this place has been used as a military plant, a garrison prison, and a defense base. All of these places during their history have been the host to some very untimely and brutal deaths. Maybe the most sinister things that this place has been home to are the ancient pagan rituals that took place here. For several hundreds of years, this was considered to be be a sacred spot, and sacrificial pagan rituals would happen every now and again. The pagan sacrifices eventually stopped, but then the state-sanctioned executions began. That's right, guys, this is also a place where state criminals were executed. In fact, the gallows from that time are said to still be standing. Throw on the fact that there have been an uncomfortably large number of people taking their own life here, and you get the perfect storm to lead to some serious hauntings. For one, the feelings of dread and despair here are widely documented. This is actually why a lot of people believe there have been so many self-inflicted deaths here. Rather than somebody deciding this is where they want to end their life, they actually enter the park in good spirits and then come to that decision by just being exposed to the environment for a long period of time. Along with these feelings of dread, there have also been a ton of reports about the smell. People have said that they felt the touch by some sort of creature and that an incredibly stinky odor has filled the air when they do. Some people have speculated that maybe this forest is home to the Walking Dead or guarded by some ogre-like being because of these smells. It may even be home to several demons that we've yet to identify. Whatever sick and scary thing lives inside of it, it's clear that it doesn't want you or I poking around its home. Seriously wouldn't recommend putting Lisa Hora on the travel plans if you're headed to Ukraine. Number 5 on this list is the Buda Labyrinth. Buda Labyrinth is a series of tunnels that are all connected under Budapest. It's a naturally forming system that humans have cultivated. They've used this place for many different purposes since ancient times. Storage and shelter are right up there as being some of the biggest. They've also, however, hosted some pretty dark and disturbing things here. These tunnels have been used as torture chambers before. They've been used as a prison before and even a dungeon back in the day. Due to some of these darker times that the tunnels have seen, it's believed that there's some residual dark energy that resides here, and the tunnels themselves are ultimately haunted. Some of the most commonly spotted spirits in these tunnels are that of 3 women. A while back, 3 female skeletons were found in the depths here. The cause of death was never fully confirmed, but it was believed by how they found them that it would have been horribly brutal. These 3 ghosts haunt this place all the time, and there are even stories about how they used to take people. They would leave the confines of these tunnels and drag unsuspecting victims down here to die. That hasn't happened for several hundred years though, so I think that we're all pretty safe in that regard. They aren't alone down here though. The souls of those who were tortured to death still linger here and oftentimes make themselves known to visitors. Disembodied voices, screams, moans, the feeling of someone's hands grazing over you as you walk past. All of these are very common occurrences down here. We just seen it time and time again where a place sees a little bit too much darkness and hate and then becomes haunted. The Buda Labyrinth is definitely one of those examples. Highly recommend keeping it off your itinerary if you're traveling to Hungary anytime soon. Number 4 on this list is Witch Island. Yeah, literally a place called Witch Island obviously is going to be making the list. There's an ancient legend that surrounds this island which has given it its name. It was a classic case where people were thought to be witches and were wrongly accused of such and then ultimately put to death. Let's Travel says, it might seem like a pleasant and relaxed place, but there is a creepy story following this place. Sezgid was suffering from a serious drought and the locals were praying for that. Suddenly one day, rain starts with chunks of ice falling from the sky and many locals were convinced of witchcraft. For that reason, 12 people were caught believing that they were witches. They killed them, and since then, locals say that they hear desperate voices crying for help on the riverside. Apparitions are also seen super regularly. These are just normal people too, or at least that's what people think. It's pretty much common knowledge at this point that these women weren't witches at all, but just regular people. These ghosts that show up are desperate and in need, and they look really sad. They probably won't hurt you, but they'll definitely make you feel something. I'd stay away from this island if you can. Number 3 on this list is Giamana. Giamana is currently an abandoned Romanian village that isn't doing too hot right now. Everything about this town was nice and quaint until in 1978 when its world got turned upside down. Communist ruler at the time, Nicolae Ceausescu, decided that he wanted to exploit a massive reserve for copper that was close to the village. This copper mine produced incredible amounts of copper and was extremely profitable, but it was at the expense of these villagers. Mining copper creates a lot of waste. Waste that you can't can't just put anywhere. Well, the dictator decided that the perfect spot was the village of Giamana. All the local villagers were ousted from their homes and sent over 100 kilometers away and given little compensation for their houses and their trouble. Then their homes and their village was swallowed up by a sea of toxic waste that's literally still here to this day. Nowadays, you can only see the top of the church poking its head out of this dangerous lake of poison. Before the villagers left, it said that they put a curse on this land. Those with ill intentions will feel the effects of despair and loneliness forever. They'll feel like an outcast from their homes, from society, and from their family and friends. It said that they wanted to make those who came to this place with ill intentions feel how they felt when they had to leave their homes and go to a completely new place with no warning. Make them feel like they don't belong and they're a burden on those around them. This feeling is echoed by those who visited this place, and locals say that if you do want to see this in person, to make sure that your intentions are nothing but kind and gentle. Factor in a whole other reason why you shouldn't go to this place, but it's literally because it's a giant lake of toxic waste, and I'm just guessing here, but I imagine that that's not ideal to be breathing in. Number 2 on this list is Dracula's castle. This wouldn't be a complete list if I didn't bring up Romania's most famous fictional character and his residence. The castle, also known as Bran Castle, is located in Transylvania, which is also in Romania. It shares a shocking resemblance to Dracula's castle in Bram Stoker's classic novel. Dracula, being a vampire, would walk around his castle walls by himself, occasionally coming out at nighttime to feast on human victims or turn them into other vampires. The character of Dracula is often associated with Vlad the Impaler, and even though Vlad didn't spend too much of his time at this castle, it's believed that this castle is the inspiration for Dracula's home. Now, I should note that this castle probably isn't actually haunted. Unlike the other entries on this list, this castle isn't known for having horrible atrocities take place inside its walls. The horrible tragedies that occurred all took place within someone's mind, and then that person wrote them on a page for all of us to envision. Therefore, in all honesty, I'm kind of breaking the rules a little bit with this entry because I do think that you should go and visit Dracula's castle. There aren't actual ghosts there, so you're not risking any harm befalling you, and you get to literally walk through the walls imagining Dracula doing the same thing. They have a restaurant by this castle, they have tons of events there, and they even throw the occasional party. On Halloween, you can go there for a special event and celebrate in Dracula's literal castle. I actually don't think I can come up with a cooler place to celebrate Halloween on Earth than in Dracula's castle, but if you guys can, then comment it down below. However, I don't know what it's gonna take to beat out Dracula's literal home. So, number 1 on this list is Corvin Castle. Corvin Castle, even though it wasn't written as Dracula's castle, honestly should have been. This is a castle in Romania that has seen its fair share of horrors, and it's deeply haunted because of it. This castle has had tons of horror stories over the years. One of them says that Vlad the Impaler was actually held captive here for 7 years in the dungeons, that he lived off of rats and he impaled them after he'd eaten them, that his deep desire for blood and death rose as he was trapped between these walls. Another legend talks of 3 Turkish prisoners who were promised freedom if they dug a 100-foot deep well. The prisoners did this, and it took them over 15 years to accomplish the project, but when they were finished, were mercilessly thrown back into their cells and tortured. This castle even has a bear pit in the dungeons. It's said that those who were sentenced to death would be taken and thrown into this bear pit with a hungry bear inside and mauled to death by the animal. Horrific torture devices have been found in this castle and other dark, sadistic things that have made it one of the most haunted spots in all of Romania. Now, due to all this violence, there are several curses and hauntings that hang over this place. The first one is the well. Locals warn to never drink from that well, and also if you visit this castle, throw a coin down there and say a prayer. The 3 Turkish prisoners who dug it cursed it before they died and made it so that bad things will come to those who drink the water. The second is a monk. There was a monk who was staying at this castle who was caught eavesdropping on a conversation between 2 people. He was taken outside and bricked until he died. His spirit still roams around the halls of this building to this day, with some people reportedly having conversations with him before. Several other people have seen ghostly apparitions of those who look to be dead, and some have even seen full scenes of people being brutally tortured. Dread, despair, depression, these are all commonly reported feelings from visitors of this castle. Certainly not a spot that I recommend going if you do find yourself in Romania. Number 5 on this list is the Devil's Precipice. The Devil's Precipice is located in the village of Cosmonel and is definitely one of the cooler entries on this list in my opinion. The Devil's Precipice is basically one big dangerous treasure hunt. The legend says that bandits hid some very valuable treasure here hundreds of years ago after they pulled off a massive heist. They didn't just leave it here though, but they actually cursed the treasure and the area around it so that the only people who could ever get it would be them. This was many years ago, and since then this curse has made it impossible for those who are hunting this treasure to ever actually find it. It's said that this area can be haunted by a bunch of different things, and your experience searching for this treasure differs from person to person. It's not uncommon though for those seeking this treasure to completely lose their minds. Apparently these people won't even be able to fully describe their experience after they finished, but their brains will just have gone to complete mush and they're just a shell of their former selves. Some people are lucky enough to not get this fate, but instead come face to face with some bull-like demons. The body of a human with the head of a bull. These creatures are said to guard the treasure and will stop at nothing to keep you from taking it. The luckiest people don't need to deal with either of these things though, and instead just get wildly confused and lost. When someone is approaching the treasure, it's said that a spell will be cast on them. They'll blink and then they'll find themselves many kilometers away from where they previously were. Their bodies just go into this trance-like state and they completely lose all sense of direction, just walking aimlessly through the woods. Oftentimes when they're found, they're completely covered in scratch marks and have no idea what happened to them. The lure of buried treasure is appealing, but it's clear that this is a treasure that just simply doesn't want to be found, and it's going to do anything to stop you from getting it. Number 4 on this list is the Chiajna Monastery. Built in 1780, this monastery is located outside the capital city of Romania. Even though Romanians back in the day spent a long time building this place, it was never really used for anything. It was never properly blessed or consecrated, and because of that, it's been host to a series of unfortunate events. It is now the site of paranormal activity. Only 10 years after it was built, Turkish troops came in and raided it. During their raid, they set a fire in this building and everything burned, but the building still stood. Then, several years later, the building and those who were in it got hit with a massive outbreak of the plague, and if that wasn't bad enough, the building was also hit later with a massive earthquake, which caused the bell tower to collapse, and the bell was drawn away by a nearby river. The fact that there's any building left standing at all is actually kind of a marvel, but due to its history, locals say it's super haunted. People warn you of going to this place because if you do, it's said that you'll get hit with some horrible luck. There have also been sightings of very sickly individuals, assumingly victims of the plague outbreak that happened many years ago. The most common paranormal experience at this place though is the ringing of a bell. The same bell that fell off so many years ago will ring out when there's a full moon in the sky. Honestly, the ringing of a bell isn't too bad and would actually be pretty cool to experience if it was a full moon, but if you do decide to go, then I recommend keeping your distance. You don't want to get a slew of bad luck following you around just so you could hear this one ghost bell. Number 3 on this list is Salgotarjani Cemetery. Cemeteries are supposed to be peaceful places where the dead can pass, but sometimes that doesn't happen and they end up like this one, deeply haunted. Orbits writes, on the far outskirts of Budapest lies a forgotten cemetery straight out of a horror movie. The tall, imposing stone gates now face an outline set on train tracks with an eerie silence only broken a few times an hour by a passing train. A knock on the gates results in 2 large guard dogs rushing to the iron bars, jaws slapping as they attempt to ward off any unwelcome visitors. Inside the giant walls of the once magnificent cemetery are rows of impressive tombs of certainly important people of their time. This cemetery is the oldest Jewish burial ground on the Pest side of the city, but fell into ruins after most of the Jewish population was forced out of the area during World War II. After a short stint as a Soviet military hangout, the forest is slowly trying to take back the land, gnawing around the massive stone and marble burial chambers. Over the years, many of the tombs have been opened and looted of anything of value. The disturbed and derelict cemetery is sure to have at least a few angered spirits still hanging around, making it a place that you may not want to visit after sunset. Angered spirits is right, guys. There are countless stories of people getting literally attacked by unknown entities that they can't defend themselves against. I imagine that these are the spirits of the individuals whose graves were robbed. That is just such a blatant act of darkness that it's bound to wake up the spirits of the dead and anger them. I'm also under the impression that some people were killed here during World War II, which most likely only adds to the haunting. The guard dogs are there for a reason, and in this case, it might actually be for our own safety. Number 2 on this list is the town of Veszprém. This town is also known as the Soviet Ghost Town. Atlas Obscura says, the forest is slowly eating the crumbling buildings within the ghost town. Once a bustling Soviet military base, it now looks like an eerie post-apocalyptic wasteland. This was mainly built in the 1960s to house Soviet soldiers. It functioned like a tiny town for the soldiers and their families, forming an isolated, self-sustaining community. It had many fixtures you'd expect to see in any civilian town, like schools, a movie theater, pubs, and restaurants, though most of the base was dominated by large blocks of barracks. After the Soviet Union fell in the late 1980s, many of the residents left the base. The Hungarian Defense Forces were gradually laid off, and the nearby War Helicopter Regiment became defunct in 2004. Now the base's only visitors are curious urban explorers and the occasional airsoft players who dart and duck around many of the neglected buildings. It didn't take long for the abandoned town to begin looking like a scene from an end-of-the-world action thriller. The buildings have begun to fade and fall. Greenery creeps over the unused streets and climbs the walls of the derelict structures. Nature is reclaiming the site from civilization, slowly clutching it within its grasp. So to begin, the town is already pretty freaking creepy. However, there's been rumors of an entity that lives here as well. In the time since it's been abandoned, people believe that a beast or monster has taken up residence here. The few people who have gone here have reported the feeling of being stalked, as if something similar to a predator lives here now and it's out to get them. Talks of a potential werewolf have been thrown out there as well, which I can honestly believe. Whatever this creature is, it's dangerous. Stay away from this town at all costs. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Isvantelic Train Yard. This is an abandoned trade yard where old cars rot away. Some of these cars rotting here, though, have seen their fair share of horrors. Atlas Obscura says, more than 100 locomotives and train cars rot away, some in deteriorating depots, others out in the field. Among these are some very rare train engines and a few cars that are said to have transported prisoners to Auschwitz during the Holocaust. Built at the beginning of the 20th century as a repair yard for the National Railway, only a few southern parts of the train yard are still in use, while most of it is abandoned. 2 large depots, a few smaller sheds, and open-air areas are scattered with locomotives and rail cars, some of them very ancient, others more recent, from Hungary's time as part of the Soviet regime. Some of the trains were brought here to be repaired and then were to be put to the Budapest Railway Museum, but never made it to the display and were instead left behind in the train yard. Now, one big reason that they never made it is because these cars are haunted, guys. The literal car that went to Auschwitz. Just think how many horrors that tiny box has seen. The souls of those who were forced in there still linger, and this train yard is haunted because of it. I feel for these souls too. They never asked for this, and now they've just been forgotten by the world. Hopefully, one day, they can find rest.
Coming in at number 5, we have Stalin's country house. Stalin spent 4 months every summer at his country home between 1943 and 1953. Located near downtown Sochi, his time here put his town on the map forever. For anyone unfamiliar with Stalin, he was a dictator for the Soviet Union from the 1930s until his death in 1953. He was responsible for the genocide of around 20 million people. His house had been mostly kept the same, and tours are given about the history of his life. The house gives insight into his life and mindset. Part of the home is even a hotel where people can sleep in the same room as the man who created so much destruction. He demanded the house be made completely green so that it could blend in with the surroundings and he would be harder to find. He also refused to have any carpets in the home. He wanted to hear intruders' feet on the stone floor if someone was approaching him. He was clearly paranoid even when summering in his country home. He worked from his office during the night with a phone connected directly to Moscow and would sleep during the day. He often changed the room that he slept in so that nobody would know exactly where he was. Stalin's height was around 5'5", which might not seem important, but it was reported that he had short man syndrome. Due to this, and it's reflected in the build. His pool was only 5 feet deep as opposed to the typical 8 feet deep. The house is eerie and unpleasant for many reasons. Not only can you see into the dark mind of the dictator, but you might catch a glimpse of the man himself. People have seen him walking around the home in his white jacket and smoking his trademark pipe. Some have heard footsteps walking around at night. The noise echoes through the home. Those who have stayed there have said the air can feel terrifying at times, like you're being watched or like you're not welcome. because you're not. Coming in at number 4, we have St. Michael's Castle. St. Michael's Castle was built in 1801 for royal residence in St. Petersburg. The castle interestingly looks different from each angle as the architects used various styles. It was built like a fortress as the royal family was in fear of assassination. This turned out to not be enough, and their fears were validated when Paul I was assassinated. He has moved into the castle 40 nights earlier. He was attacked in his bedroom by a group of dismissed officers. They tried to force him to sign his abdication from the throne. He resisted and the attackers continued. He was succeeded by his son, Emperor Alexander I. After Paul's passing, the family returned to the Winter Palace. The castle was gifted to the army in 1823. In the early 1990s, it became a museum. It is considered that Paul's spirit is now trapped, unable to leave the castle. It seems to be very restless and is often seen by visitors to the museum. He has mostly been seen walking down corridors carrying a candle. Others have claimed to hear distant screams from closed-off parts of the castle. It echoes in the wall like a whisper. People have reportedly tried to celebrate the spirit and speak with it to bring it peace, but after all these years, it still appears to be restless and angry about what happened all that time ago.
Number 3 on this list is Woodcoist Forest. Woodcoist Forest is a big forest that's located near the city of Krakow. This forest was just a normal forest until something extremely horrible happened back in 2001. It's said that 9 students were out at the forest having a bonfire, drinking, and celebrating the start of the school year. Apparently, as they were partying, a man came across the group and told them not to go deeper into the forest. This happened at around 8:30 p.m., so the group, they still had tons of night left. Rather than heed his warning, the students did the exact opposite. They wanted to go check out what was so scary and unsafe about the depths of this forest. They grabbed their things, and they went into the woods. And since that moment, none of them have ever been seen again. After the students disappeared, police and investigators searched for a while, but with no success. Many people have speculated upon what happened to those students back in 2001. Is there some type of killer loose in the woods? Are the woods haunted by a ghost? Did the students just get lost in the trees? The most popular legend is about an old village from hundreds of years ago called Mirena. This town eventually burned down, but lots of its inhabitants died in the woods from satanic rituals that were being performed in that area. People think that the spirits of those that died here are now what haunt the space. You can tell that they're around you because a strange green fog can be seen forming in the forest. Definitely not a spot I would recommend going, considering there's a chance that you might not come back out. Number 2 on this list is Augraginek Castle. The Augraginek Castle is one of the most haunted spots in the country for sure. In fact, many of you were commenting about this place in the last video that I did about Poland. This castle is a medieval castle that's located in south-central Poland. It was initially built in the 14th century but has been rebuilt many times throughout its long history. In the early 17th century, this castle was owned by Stanislaw Wierszycki, and it's the spirit of this man that haunts the walls to this day. The spirit of this guy doesn't manifest itself in a human form though. The ghost at this castle is a black dog that has massive chains weighing down on its neck. Stanislaw was said to have been an extremely cruel man when he was alive. He made a fortune during his life but refused to share any of it with anyone, even his own family. His servants and subjects got the worst though. For his own amusement, he would often take them down into the dungeons of his castle and mercilessly torture them there. It's said that even the devil was repulsed by this man's actions and has condemned his spirit to return from hell every now and again in the form of this dog. Howls can be heard and chains scraping across the ground echo throughout the castle walls. Frankly, I think it's a very fitting end that a man who looked at other humans as dogs is now the spirit of one. Number 1 on this list is the Zofiówka Psychiatric Hospital. This haunted psychiatric hospital is located in Otwock, which is very close to Warsaw. This location is currently abandoned and probably for good reason. It was established in 1907 and was intended to be a psychiatric hospital specifically for Jewish individuals. Prior to World War II, this hospital was considered one of the most prestigious neuropsychiatric centers in all of Poland. As you may expect though, when World War II began and Poland was taken over by the German army, the conditions of this hospital got very bad. The Mental Institute was still running at the beginning of the German occupation. Its location was inside the Jewish ghetto of Otwock. As I mentioned though, the lifestyle of these Jewish patients, it was horrific. It's estimated that roughly 400 Jewish patients died from starvation and torture in the early goings of the occupation. This all culminated on August 19th, 1942 when a horrible atrocity took place. 100 to 140 of the occupants were rounded up and brought outside the hospital. There, they were all executed on the spot. Any patients who remained were put onto the trains along with all of the other Jewish residents of Otwock and sent to the extermination camp Treblinka. It should also be noted that many of the workers at this institute took their own life before they were taken onto the trains. Nowadays, this hospital is abandoned and doesn't serve any purpose, but locals have said that it's very haunted. People who go past this spot often hear disturbing moans and cries coming from thin air. People have also seen ghostly apparitions walking around the forest that's right next to this building, a forest where many deaths took place. They describe these apparitions as having blurred faces with a weird glow to them. This is just one of the many spots in Poland that has a horrible history due to the events that transpired during German occupation. If you do ever go to this place, then make sure to show some respect. The atrocities that happened here were real, and we can't take them lightly. Number 5 on this list is Trevale Forest. Located near the Romanian city Pitești, Trevale Forest has several ghostly legends surrounding it. Some of them are old and have been rumored for centuries, whereas others have only recently gained the public's attention. Wikipedia writes, there's a legend about a maiden, daughter of a rich landowner who loved a poor servant of her father. Her father found a rich old man for her to marry, but during the wedding day, she ran with the servant in the forest. Her father found them and killed her lover and then decapitated her. It's generally accepted that the two scary things about the forest are the decapitated ghost of the bride and the people going into the forest to do satanic rituals. So that's the old legend that circulates around this forest and has been talked about for several hundred years. It's currently unknown what satanic rituals were performed here and in what time, but many assume that this forest has seen its fair share of human sacrifices and that those killed here still restlessly wander the woods to this day. The more recent legend that started some odd 30 years ago was actually from a taxi driver. It's said that a taxi driver drove a woman out to these woods as she requested him to. Then as payment for the trip was given her wedding ring. He was told to wait for her there until she was done with her business, which was in a very creepy abandoned old building right outside of the forest. As he was waiting though, he fell asleep, and when he woke up he was no longer in the same place or in the same time. It was 10 years later that he woke up in a building close to where his car was initially parked. When he went back to his car, he discovered the wedding ring attached to a finger, and heard later that the woman he drove that day killed herself 10 years prior. I can't even imagine how jarring it would be to wake up in a different place 10 years later. Like most mornings I wake up, I'm already disoriented, but that would be another level for sure. Ever since this story came out, taxi drivers around Romania don't ever want to drive here or pick someone up from this forest. A decapitated lover, human sacrifices, and a woman who took her own life and has the ability to bend time. Yeah, this forest definitely makes the list for places to avoid. Number 4 on this list is Banfi Castle. Banfi Castle is a very nice castle located in the small village of Bolinda. It's called the Banfi Castle because the Banfi family are the ones who own it. Wikipedia writes, dubbed the Versailles of Transylvania, the castle is reportedly haunted by the ghost of a young servant who paid with his life because he revealed that his mistress deceived her husband. Another variant is that the place is haunted by the ghosts of those who died in Banfi during the Second World War, when the castle was converted by the Germans into a military hospital. Legend says that there were often seen sinister shadows that seemed to be some of the soldiers, while through walls were heard strange noises, groans, sounds of footsteps, or indistinct voices. Some personal reports from those who visited this castle before have talked about the first part of the legend. They've said that they've seen the ghost of a young man in his 20s dressed in rags and looking as if he just got beaten. This must have been the servant who revealed that secret about the mistress so many years prior. The one positive about this place is that, unlike some of the other entries on this list, it isn't life-threatening to go here. That being said, some people have said that after they visited this place, they felt an aura of bad juju surround them for a long time. Like this parasite of bad luck and bad energy that's latched on and won't let go. It's a beautiful castle on the outside, and I'm sure that it would be nice to visit, but probably not worth the risk when we're talking about ghost servants and decade-long bad luck. Number 3 on this list is Mount Sleza. Mount Sleza is a Polish mountain in the Sudeten Foreland, southern Poland. This mountain has an incredible amount of lore and history connected to it. There's a great article detailing the power connected to this mountain called Psychic Haunting Mount Sleza, written by a man named Nathan, and I'm going to quote his article now. The truth is that Sleza is an ancient ritual site of local Celtic culture, later on used by other pagan societies before Christianity came. Over hundreds of years, the place filled with positive spiritual energies, and for this day, these energies can be sensed. It's also a haunted place, but not by some ghosts and apparitions, but by real spirits, and I'm talking about spirits that were never human. Some people call these entities the spirits of nature. In any case, these are the spirits of the mountain. They protect it and they help people in their spiritual pursuits. As spirits of this sort, they can be very helpful but also very dangerous if you fail to show them proper respect. Unfortunately, a lot of tourists fail to show this kind of respect by leaving rubbish on tourist routes or even by sitting on cult sculptures. Don't do this no matter what kind of sacred place you're visiting. You wouldn't sit down on a crucifix if you're Christian, would you? So that's the history of this mountain and how it's come to be haunted by some ancient spirits. Now the good thing about this mountain is if you ever do decide to go, you don't need to be haunted. If you walk in and you show these ancient spirits respect, then you may even receive a good vision from them. This place will basically give you back what you put into it, so if you do decide to go, then approach it seriously, and you should be fine. Number 2 on this list is Choka Castle. This is another Polish castle that was built in the 13th century, but this one is far more haunted than the last. We currently don't know exactly what the initial castle would have looked like because in 1909 it was rebuilt to resemble the style of the 18th century. It's a very beautiful castle and located right next to a river with incredible scenery. This castle is absolutely riddled with ghosts though. The first ghosts to mention, and the ones that you would interact with first if you were to visit this castle, is a group of dead that lie at the bottom of the river. Back in 1719, as a funeral was taking place, people were walking the casket over the castle bridge. That bridge collapsed into the river and several of the people who fell in drowned. It's been reported by many people going to this castle that the screams of those who drowned can still be heard as you walk over said bridge. The scariest part is that their screams aren't the loudest ones there. A woman's cries for help are the ones that can be heard the most when passing over this bridge, and it's believed that those cries belong to Joachim von Nitz's wife. Joachim was one of the owners of this castle during its history, and what he's remembered for at this location is rather brutal. His wife had an affair and got pregnant with another man's child. Joachim felt exceptionally betrayed and hurt, so he responded by drowning his wife in that river. This wasn't enough for him though, because he actually allowed her to give birth, and then as she watched, he took her newborn child and bricked it up in the chimney. This is why when people pass by the chimney in this castle, the screaming of a newborn can be heard ringing throughout. Believe it or not though, there's still another ghost that haunts this place. This woman's name was Gertrude and she lived at this place before any of the other ghosts did. One evening she got in a heated argument with her brother. This sparked her inevitable betrayal where she set an army upon this castle. They didn't conquer the castle though, and she was found out. Her brother held nothing back and beheaded her for her actions whilst also cursing her in the process. Now her spirit is cursed to live in this castle forever. For anybody that's counting, that makes 4 separate ghosts that live at this castle. Certainly not a spot that I would recommend visiting. Number 1 on this list is the Rice Complex. The Rice Complex is a massive underground city with a connection of tunnels that is located inside the Owl Mountains. This was a project that the Germans started in World War II in 1943. Now the exact purpose behind this project is currently unknown, however most assume that it was going to act as a secret German military defense base. It was never fully finished, with about only half of the project getting constructed, but if it ever was fully constructed, then capturing it would have been extremely difficult, considering it would have been impossible to bomb as it's located in a mountain, and physically storming up said mountain to take it would have proven even more challenging. Even though it's only half finished, there was still a massive amount of infrastructural work done on this project. It's estimated that 257,000 cubic meters of reinforced concrete was brought into these tunnels during the 2 years it was under construction. It's also believed that some of the tunnels and pathways haven't even been discovered yet. This is partly because some of the tunnels have flooded over the years, but frankly, could be a blessing in disguise, as they're said to be very haunted. Now, I don't think I need to describe in detail some of the brutalities that the Germans committed during World War II. We're all aware of how abhorrent some of those actions were. The construction of this project, it was no exception. Many of the prisoners who were forced to work on this complex were either killed or died from being overworked. Lots of people lost their lives far too soon, and it's really sad to think about. The people who have been in these tunnels have said that all of that brutality left its mark. Some of the souls of those who died here still haunt it to this day. People have reported seeing ghostly apparitions wandering through the tunnels and the sounds of hard labor reverberating throughout. I'm not actually even sure if you can visit this place, but I wouldn't recommend going even if you could. Number 5 on this list is Kecini Castle. Kecini Castle was a castle built in the 13th century in south-central Poland. This castle was host to many battles over the years until it ultimately fell in the 18th century. Many Polish kings lived in this castle, at least at one point of their reign, and at one point it was rather marvelous. Now it's a ruin of its former self and still haunted by a ghost of a past royal. Queen Bona Sforza lived a very interesting and lavish lifestyle for someone in the 1500s. She was initially born in Milan to a very wealthy and powerful Italian family. This family's influence was vast, and many powerful people wanted to wed Bona Sforza. Eventually, Polish King Sigismund, nicknamed the Old, was the selected suitor and the pair got married. This made Bona Sforza Queen Bona Sforza of Poland. It's the ghost of this Polish queen that is said to haunt the castle walls to this day though. A lady in white that floats through the walls of the ruined castle searching for something. Or at least that's what people have reported when they've seen her. They say that her ghost looks as if she's trying to find something that she lost. That her ghost looks extremely troubled and distraught. This all stems back to the legend of what happened when she was alive. The manner of her death is hazy at best, but whilst she was living, it's believed that Queen Bona Sforza hid a bundle of treasure somewhere around this castle. Many people think it was beneath the river near the castle, whilst others believe it's underneath the castle itself. Either way, now her soul continually wanders the grounds searching for this treasure, as if finding it will release her from this purgatory state. From the reports that I read, many people don't think that she is dangerous, which is a good thing, but they have noted feeling very sad around this castle. Some people have said that after visiting said castle, it felt as if a cloud of depression hung over them for several months after the fact. Potentially the same feeling the soul of Queen Bona Sforza has all the time. Number 4 on this list is the Skull Chapel of Kazermna. This is one of the creepiest spots in Europe if you ask me. This is a Polish church that was built in 1776 to 1804 by Father Wacław Tomaziak. When he first started building this church, he got hit with a pretty unsettling surprise. Digging into the ground, he discovered bones, and then more bones, and then more bones after that. Thousands of dead remains littered the area right underneath his feet where his church was being built. This didn't stop him though. In fact, it only inspired him. He got the local undertaker, and then they collectively worked on digging up every single remain that they could find. They learned that these dead bodies were from a mass grave that was put there during the 30 Years' War, which happened over a century prior. After cleaning off all of the dead skulls and bones, the father took them and hung them all throughout his church. Now you have this incredibly eerie room with over 3,000 skulls and bones hanging down from the walls. Obviously, a location like this has sparked some rumors of a haunting over the past years. People believe that the spirits of the dead soldiers were angered that their grave was disturbed, and now their spirits haunt the church. Reports of incredible uneasiness is said to be felt by most people that enter this space and stay there for a while. Honestly though, I'm not sure if this is indicative of a haunting in this case. Pretty sure anyone would feel uneasy if they were standing in the middle of 3,000 dead skulls that were all staring down at them. Number 3 on this list is Iulia Hezdu Castle. Bogdan Hezdu was a Romanian intellectual who was very wealthy at the end of the 18th century. Bogdan, even though he put lots of effort into his work and business, put the most of his time into his daughter. Iulia Hezdu was his daughter, and in Bogdan's eyes could do no wrong. That's why when she passed very unexpectedly at the age of 19, Bogdan fell into a deep depression. While she was alive, she was rather remarkable. In her early teens, she knew 7 languages and had already graduated several prestigious schools for piano and vocals. She apparently excelled at her schooling as well and was set to have a very fruitful life if she hadn't been taken too early due to tuberculosis. Bogdan, as I mentioned, didn't respond super well to this and reacted by building the Iulia Hezdu Castle. Little did he know that it was going to be haunted. Apparently he partook in spiritism sessions with people who were trained in reaching out to the dead. In these sessions, he would communicate with his daughter's ghost, and she would tell him how she wanted her castle to be constructed. This is how it was built, and everything that he decided to do and tell the architect apparently came directly from the ghost of his daughter. Her ghost didn't just leave things be when this castle was finished though. In fact, she fully took up residence here. It's said that the ghost of this girl can be spotted walking throughout the halls of this castle very often. Many people report hearing the sound of a piano playing, assumingly at the hands of this ghost. What's even creepier though is that this piano playing will instantly be followed by the applause of her dead father. Also, this castle has several rooms specifically made for spiritual rituals and also an area to worship Satan. From what I've heard, the ghost here isn't particularly dangerous in nature, but it still sounds like one of the creepier spots in the whole country. Number 2 on this list is Poenari Fortress. This fortress has been riddled with death and destruction ever since it was first built. Even though in the first part of this series we talked about Dracula's castle, this is the castle where Vlad the Impaler, the inspiration for Dracula's character, spent a large part of his time. It's said that he saw the ruins of a fortress here at the beginning of his rule and thought that it would be a great place for a stronghold. He enslaved his enemies and worked them around the clock to revive the fortress to its former glory. Many of them died due to the extensive labor and fatigue, and those who didn't were killed by being impaled. Now, it's said that some of their spirits haunt this place, but they aren't the only ghost that still lingers here. The most notable haunting of this place is actually done by Vlad the Impaler's wife. During Vlad's reign, this fortress fell under siege by his enemies. Vlad was able to escape the castle, but his wife wasn't so lucky. The castle was falling, and rather than get captured by the oncoming army, she decided to fling herself off of the castle walls over top of a cliff. Her body fell far and dropped into a river many hundreds of feet below. It's said that the river ran red with blood, and it was nicknamed the Lady's River following this. Her ghost now forever wanders around this castle restless. Some say that her soul can never find peace because she could never forgive her husband for abandoning her all those years ago. This is why locals say that she has it out for any married men that visit the castle. Although visiting this castle would definitely make for a fun day trip, it might just not be worth it. Number 1 on this list is Hohe Baciu Forest. Often referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, this forest is on pretty much everyone's list when it comes to the most haunted forests in the world. It all started when in 1968 a military technician took a photo of the area and captured what looked to be a UFO hovering over top of the woods. An article from My Best Place writes, after this incident, other inexplicable events soon followed, including the disappearance of a shepherd and his 200 sheep which were never found again, and the disappearance of a 5-year-old girl who later reappeared 5 years later wearing the same clothes and without having aged even one day. There have also been many first-hand reports from people who have entered the forest only to come out with burns, severe rashes, headaches, and a high fever which they didn't have before. Some studies have revealed higher than usual radioactivity produced by natural uranium present in the subsoil. The part in that article about burns and rashes and other things is one of the most common reports described by the people who go here. It seems that everyone who enters into these woods leaves with some sort of trauma. Most of that trauma is mental though. Feelings of despair and depression are widely documented from pretty much everyone who steps foot into this forest. All of the numerous reports, the photographs, and the general lore around this place has to make it the most haunted spot in all of Romania. Definitely not a forest that I recommend going to if you're looking to get outdoors. Number 5 on this list is Sismigiu Hotel. Located in Bucharest, this hotel was initially built over 100 years ago in 1912 and was first called the Palace Hotel. It was called this because it truly was a marvel back then and was one of the most beautiful spots in the country. The architect who built it owned the property until 1948 when it was ultimately taken by the state. This is where it was given the name that it has today. For the next 20 years or so, the hotel thrived and wasn't only just a spot for the super wealthy to vacation, but was also a spot of parliamentary meetings and other things of great importance. In 1970 though, this hotel shut down. It was simply a side effect of the communist wave that was sweeping through this part of the world, and therefore the hotel was neglected for 20 years until finally it reopened in 1990. It wasn't used as a hotel anymore though, but rather as student housing for the students enrolled in the Academy of Film and Theatre. It was during this phase when Sismigiu Hotel saw the tragedy that haunts it to this day. Nelly Bajan was a young student who was staying here during her time in school. The semester had come to an end though, and it was Christmas time when the incident happened. She was one of the only students who didn't go home for Christmas and instead decided to stay in her dorm. One evening she was walking down the hall, and due to some of the lights being out, she stepped into the elevator shaft where there was no elevator waiting for her. She fell down several stories and landed at the bottom of the shaft, writhing in agony. She didn't die immediately though. In fact, it took her over 3 hours to finally die from her wounds. 3 hours where she was screaming and yelling for help, but nobody could hear her because they were all home for Christmas. Now her spirit haunts this place, and many students have reported hearing cries for help coming from nowhere. Some have seen her ghost standing at the end of the hallway, looking as if she's desperate for someone's attention. The sad thing about this is that if it would have happened at any other time when students were in the building, she likely would have been saved and never would have died at all. Just a horrible tragedy that's left its mark on this hotel for good. Number 4 on this list is the Witch's Pond. So this is a bit of a weird one. The Witch's Pond is a very small collection of water in the Boldu Cristeka forest that's said to be haunted. A few legends have come from this place. The first one, which I don't actually think is true, but I'm gonna tell you guys anyways, is that Vlad the Impaler was decapitated here. Now it could be possible that this did happen. The truth behind Vlad's death has been debated for centuries, but I find it unlikely that the killers would take him out to this pond in this forest and do it out here. The second legend, which I think is far more likely and probably did actually happen, is that a witch was killed here. An article on the subject writes, as the legend goes, 18th century villagers put a witch to death in the woods near a swampy pond in colonial era cemetery of Equia Creek. Her name, it said, was Edith, and her body was tossed into the water. This killing is how the pond got its name, the Witch's Pond. After she was killed, strange occurrences started happening here that couldn't be explained. It's said that the water turns blood red in the springtime, and sometimes people see a witch-like figure hovering over this bloody liquid. In other reports, there's a sacrificial altar that spawned here, and she's standing by it waiting to sacrifice someone. The sound of bodies being thrown into the pond along with a witch's cackle can be heard ringing throughout the forest. Locals avoid this pond, and you should too. Also, if you think about it, it's just a small pond, so I don't really know why you'd be going there anyways. Number 3 on this list is Radovan Forest. In this particular forest, they had a pretty tragic event that happened back in the 1940s. There are multiple variations of the legend, but it all boils down to a bride who takes her own life. The first variation of the legend says that the bride came here and took her life after her husband was brutally murdered on the night of their wedding. The second one says that she took her own life before her wedding after a local business owner had their way with her without her consent. Regardless of what led to her taking her own life, she did, and it's now thought by the locals that her spirit haunts this forest and is quite dangerous. A road runs on one side of the forest, and people who drive on it are told to hit the gas pedal and get through it as fast as possible. Apparently, this woman will appear on the side of the road and through some means have a car stop. Then she'll convince the driver to come out and follow her into the woods, maybe because she's in danger or because she promised them something once they get in there. Once they've gone deep enough into the forest though, where the road is almost out of view, is when she'll strike. No one who's gotten out of their car to help this woman has ever come back from that forest and is lost to the woods forever. Also, to add some fuel to this legend, there's a lake in the forest that's claimed dozens of lives over the years. Majority of those that have perished here are men as well, which fuels the narrative of how she died. If you happen to be passing by this forest, then do as the locals suggest and gun it down the road. At the end of the day, a speeding ticket is better than a torturous death from a ghost. Number 2 on this list is the House of the Devil. This is your classic tale of a worn out and degraded home that's now haunted. Located on General Propagescu Street in Bucharest, this house has one of the strangest looking exteriors I've ever seen. It's almost 100% covered in ivy with just tiny spots of the actual home being able to be seen. This really gives off a foreboding sensation and fuels the narrative that something sinister is happening inside the home, hidden from the public's view. A user who's nicknamed himself Dracula has written on a site detailing Romania's most haunted spots that during the interwar period, a man killed here 2 women and a third woman took her own life. Also, some say that on nights with a full moon on one side of the house, you can see the number 666, a symbol of the devil, and here would live a demonic entity full of hate and anger that can be felt from afar. The number 666 showing up is why this home has been named the House of the Devil. Potentially, the demon that haunts this home possessed that one man who killed the 2 women and forced him to do it. Or maybe the sadistic actions of this man are what summoned the demon in the first place. Either way, it's abundantly clear by looking at this house from the road that it's not the sort of place you want to mess around with. People have said that they feel scared walking by the home as if somebody's watching them. Just that foreboding feeling of a dark spirit or aura in their vicinity wanting to strike. Avoid this house at all costs if you ever find yourself in Bucharest. Number 1 on this list is Cafluega Fresca Forest. Yep, that's right guys. Another forest has made the list. Something clearly needs to be up with these Romanian trees that just makes people act crazy, because this is actually getting a little bit ridiculous. Honestly, this one sounds like something directly from a movie or a video game too. Apparently the forest in question has a curse that hangs over it. This curse shouldn't be detrimental to you or to me, but those that have been cursed by this place are probably not the type of individuals that you'd want to have a run-in with. Several hundred years ago, a monastery was in this forest and it housed a bunch of monks. These monks minded their own business and didn't cause any problems for anyone, but were still senselessly murdered by an army of Turks that was raiding the area. Right before the last monk died though, he made sure to put a curse on everyone who participated in the spilling of blood of his fallen friends. The curse made it so that after these men had died, the ones who murdered the monks, their spirits came back to the forest and are forever stuck in this purgatory state in the confines of these woods. Similarly to the scene in the third Lord of the Rings where Aragorn visits the ghost army in the mountains, this is kind of the same thing but in a forest instead. There's only one safe spot in this entire forest, and it's by a white cross that has remained from the monastery in the center of the woods. I don't like my chances against an army of the living, but I especially don't like my chances against an army of the dead. Not a forest that I recommend going if you want to make it out with your life.